What's up, guys? So this is the first Commander deck tech on my channel here. It's going to be a little different than most of the other deck techs you guys see online. This one, I am going to go over all the creatures, artifacts, planeswalkers, instants, sorceries, enchantments in the deck. I'm not going to go over the lands. I am going to put the link, however, in the top of the description box. So you guys can go check out the link and you can see all the lands that are in the deck, the artifacts, all the cards that I'm going over, going through the deck. And if you want to build it and try it out yourself, go for it. But kicking this off, I figured we would start with one of the better commanders that I have. That being the classic Edgar Markov with his Eminence. Whenever you cast another vampire spell, if Edgar is in the command zone or the battlefield, create a 1/1 black vampire creature token. He has first strike haste. When he attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on each other vampire you control. So this deck gets really, really wide, really fast, and the creatures get really big, really fast. But that being said, let's jump into this deck tech. Hopefully you guys enjoy. Leave a like on the video if you do, and down below, let me know what cards you might run in this deck, or if you ever played against Markov, or if you have Markov, and how close is my build to the one you've seen or the one you're playing. Now, this is not ACEDH build, so this is not gonna like turn 1 win, but I have won games on turn 4 or 5 with this deck. So, kicking it off, let's jump into the Lords of the deck. Thirsting Bloodlord, Captivating Vampire, Legion Lieutenant, and good old Edgar the Charmed Groom himself. And then, those of you that don't know, when he dies, he transforms. I'll just pull this out for you guys to see the other side. And when he transforms, he becomes Edgar Markov's Coffin. And at the beginning of your upkeep, create a 1/1 white and black vampire creature token with lifelink, and put a bloodline counter on Edgar Markov's Coffin. And if there are 3 or more counters on the coffin, you transform it and it goes back to the Charmed Groom. And we are running it in Buffy the Vampire Slayer sleeves. So those are your Lord effects of the deck. We're going to keep the good old Charmed Groom here because we are going to talk about his lovely bride next. Olivia the Crimson Bride. This card is amazing. I can't believe it came out and it does what it does. But when Olivia attacks, return target creature from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped and attacking. It gains when you don't control a legendary vampire. Exile this creature card. So you're playing a handful of legendary vampires. So this is great. And that's an every turn effect. Like this, it gets out of hand quickly. So next we have the Defiant Bloodlord. Whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. Cliffhaven Vampire, same thing. When you gain life, each opponent loses 1 life. Cruel Celebrant. Whenever another creature or planeswalker you control or Cruel Celebrant dies, each opponent loses 1 life. You gain 1 life. Everybody's favorite vampire, I'm sure. Blood Artist. When Blood Artist or another creature dies, target player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Drawnless Emissary. At the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent loses 1 life. You gain 1 life. So lots of gain life effects and lose life effects for opponents. We'll get into the main combo for that a little bit later. But we have Forerunner of the Legion here. Search your library for a vampire card. Put it on top of your library after shuffling your library. And when another vampire you control enters the battlefield under your control, target creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So another way to pump your creatures and a way to search for a vampire early on in the game. Blood Vial Purveyor, Flying Trample. When an opponent casts a spell, that player creates a blood token, and when the Purveyor attacks, it gets +1/+0 for each blood token defending player controls. Now, I Personally, I don't know how I feel about this because the blood tokens, your opponent could just sacrifice them, okay? So they're going to discard a card. They're going to draw a card. Like, I don't know how crazy I am about this, but it is decent. Champion of the Dusk. When it enters the battlefield, you draw X cards, lose X life, where X is the number of vampires you control. And just so you know, you're going to have a lot of vampires. Dominating Vampire. When it enters, gain control of target creature with a mana value less than or equal to the number of vampires you control until end of turn. Untap that creature. It has haste until end of turn. Your opponent's face, man. You drop this when they drop their big shit, and their face just... You know what? Species Specialist. When it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Obviously, you're going to choose vampires. And whenever a creature of that chosen type dies, you may draw a card. Got Bishop of the Bloodstained. When it enters the battlefield, target opponent loses 1 life for each vampire you control. Vona, Butcher of Magon. Pay 7 life, destroy target. Non-land permanent, you can only activate this during your turn, but who really cares? You're just going to pay 7 life and kill something. Yahenni, Undying Partisan. I think everybody should know what Yahenni does. The Blood Witch here, protection from white. And when it enters battlefield, each opponent loses life equal to the number of vampires you control, and you gain life equal to the life lost that way. The Mind Eater. When it deals damage to a player, exile a card from his or her hand face down. You may look at those exiled cards and play them. Vishkal. This card is highly underrated in this deck. You can sack all your 1/1 tokens to Vishkal to put +1/+1 counters on him. And then remove the counters and give something -1/-1 for all the counters removed. Lots of ways to build that up. Butcher Malik here, because if your creatures are going to be dying, we want your opponent sacking stuff. Dark Imposter. No Priest of Oblivion. And if it was kicked, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So a little bit of graveyard recurrence there. Anya, Maid of Dishonor. I laughed the first time I saw this card. But when 1 or more other vampires enter the battlefield, create a blood token. This ability only triggers once each turn. And then you can sacrifice another creature or a blood token. Each opponent loses 2 life, and you gain 2 life. Pawn of Ulamog, because your creature is going to be dying. The Callous Blood Mage. Falconwrath, Aristocrat, sacrifice creature. Gains indestructible. And if the sacrifice creature was a human, put a +1/+1 counter, but you do not have any humans in the deck. Except 1 or 2, so the chances of you sacking a human are slim to none. But it could happen. You never know. Bloodthirsty Aerialist. Whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter. You have lots of ways to gain life in this deck. Voldaren Bloodcaster. Whenever a non-token vampire you control dies, create a blood token. When you can create a blood token, if you control 5 or more, you can transform this card. And when it transforms, it becomes the Bloodbat Summoner. At the beginning of your combat on your turn, up to 1 target blood token you control becomes a 2/2 black bat with haste in addition to its other types. So I don't understand how a blood token turns into a bat, but it does. So there's that. You got the Rune Sage here. At the beginning of your upkeep, each player sacrifices a non-vampire creature. 9 times out of 10, you're only going to have vampires, so you're not going to end up sacking anything. Nighthawk, everybody's favorite vampire shaman. The Bishop of Rebirth. When it attacks, return target creature card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. It gives you recurrence with your creatures. Dark Baron, whenever a creature dies, put 2 +1/+1 counters on this card. And when another player loses the game, you gain life equal to the life total of that player's life at the beginning of their turn. This card gets nasty quick. And it gets big quick. Especially if you have your Butcher Malakir and your Ashnod's Altar and some 1/1 tokens, you just start sacking your tokens, everyone's sacking shit, and then he gets big. You're a Necromancer. You may return a vampire or wizard from your graveyard to the battlefield. More graveyard recurrence. Thief of Heartbeats to give your stuff Death Touch, because what's better than vampires with Death Touch? And when a creature you control deals combat damage to a planeswalker, destroy that planeswalker. Dusk Apostle. One or more non-token vampires. Attack, you make a 1/1 with lifelink. And Nosferatu, because I can't go without laughing at his name sometimes. That is the creatures for your deck. The Planeswalkers, we're only running the best Planeswalkers for the deck. Sorin, and Sorin. Obviously, because what other Planeswalker are you going to run besides Sorin? So you got all three of the Sorins. We do not have the -10 Sorin in here. I do want to pick it up though, or the one that's like -4 and you set your opponent's life total to 10. But for now, we're just running these ones. Artifacts for the deck. Soul Ring, Traveler's Omelet, Swiftfoot Boots, Orzhov Signet, your Savai Crystal. Those are your Mana Rocks and your Swiftfoot Boots. Oh, we got a couple more here. Mardu Banner and Boros Signet. And then probably one of the best artifacts in the deck, the Altar with your Blood Artist and your Butcher Malakir, so you can start sacking your stuff to get your opponent's stuff off the board. That's it for artifacts. For enchantments, we're running Anointed Profession. You can create one or more tokens under your control. It creates twice that many of those tokens instead. Blind Obedience to slow your opponents down and extort them to death. Dictate of Erebos, because if your stuff is going to die, they're going to have to sack theirs. And then the two best enchantments in the deck, in my opinion, Sanguine Bond and Exquisite Blood. So if you don't know what these two do together, they are the opposites of each other. Sanguine Bond, whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. And Exquisite Blood says whenever an opponent loses life, you gain that much life. So if you get these two on the board, they just go back and forth and kill all your opponents. Can't run vampires without this. Come on. Exquisite Blood has a freaking vampire sucking the blood out of somebody's arm right there on the artwork. Alright, so instance. Time for the fun stuff. Removal. Path to Exile. Swords to Plowshares. Terminate. Mortify, Crackling Doom. These are your smaller removals in the deck. Crackling Doom deals 2 damage to each opponent. Each opponent sacrifices a creature with the greatest power among creatures he or she controls. And then obviously the other ones are single target removals. Crackling Doom is kind of single target removal, but it's whatever the highest power card is on the deck. Now your full out board wipes. Ruinous Ultimatum. Destroy all online permanents your opponent's controls. I got this off the other day. Literally on the turn, my opponent could have won. Like if I didn't beat them that turn, they were going to win. I top decked this card, cast it, and won the game. Merciless Eviction. Exile. You get to choose one, either artifacts, creatures, enchantments, or planeswalkers. Usually, I end up choosing the creature part of this, but you never know. Depending on the game you're in, you might be up against a heavy artifact deck and you want to exile all the artifacts, or a heavy enchantment deck or a planeswalker deck. You never know. Sorceries. Feast of Blood. Another removal spell. Patrician's Bidding. Each player chooses a creature type. Return all creature cards of the chosen type from their graveyard to the battlefield. And this is hit or miss. I mean, if you're up against like a tribal deck, then this will help your opponent just as much as it helps you. But if you're against a deck that doesn't have a lot of the same type creatures, it'll be fine. Diabolic Tutor is the last card in the deck. Now, I know this deck needs a little more searches. I'm thinking about getting Grim Tutor. What's the other one? Grim Tutor. Well, there's a couple other tutors. I'm probably going to get them in the next coming weeks here. So once I do get them, if I get them, I'll do an updated deck tech. But search your deck for any card. Guys, that is the Edgar Markov deck tech. Like I said in the beginning, the deck list is in the description box for you guys with all the lands. So you guys can just go check out the lands down there. And if you guys have any questions, leave them down below. If you have any suggestions, leave them down below as well. And I will see you guys in the next video.